College, and I welcome our administrator, Reverend Father Roshan Rasta, our principal, Dr. Shivaprasad K, and our vice principal, Dr. E.S.J. Prabhugiran, to this session. I welcome each one of you, my dear fellow homeopaths, to this learning session. So, it is your participation that makes this program a huge success. Okay? For being the moderator of this session, we have an apt personality amongst us. So, I welcome Dr. Sheena Salim, Professor and HOD, Department of Pathology and Microbiology, Fadamulla Homeopathic Medical College. I welcome ma'am and I request you to take over. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good evening to one and all present here to witness the 6th day of webinar series ProVision 2020 organized by Fadamulla Homeopathic Medical College, Mangalore. Thyroid diseases are arguably among the commonest endocrine disorders worldwide. India too is no exception. It has been estimated that almost 42 million people in India suffer from thyroid diseases. Thyroid disorders can range from a simple deficiency disorder like a harmless goiter that needs no treatment to autoimmune disorder or a life-threatening cancer. Today, we have our own alumnus, Dr. Anu Joseph, as resource person to speak on the clinical approach on managing thyroid cases. Dr. Anu Joseph completed her graduation at Baxon's Homeopathic Medical College, Great Noida, and pursued her post-graduation in case taking and repertorization from Fadamulla Homeopathic Medical College, Mangalore in 2012. She has served as a senior research fellow and research associate of National Homeopathic Research Institute in mental health and under CCRH Kottayam, and has a clinical experience of 8 years. Presently, she serves as a postgraduate medical officer under National Ayush Mission at District Homeo Hospital, Idukki, Kerala. She is in charge there of the research project on thyroid diseases and its clinical approach with homeopathy done by the National Ayush Mission and Kerala State Government. With a small introduction, I present before you Dr. Anu Joseph, and I welcome her to take over the session. Over to you, Dr. Anu.
Thank you, ma'am, for the lovely introduction. You've already given an introduction for the thyroid disorders also, so my job has become a little easier now. Shall I start on with the session?
Yeah, carry on, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. Today I'll be talking about clinical approach. How do we manage a thyroid case when in our day-to-day practice? So why I chose this topic is because I am, as Sheena ma'am already introduced, I'm doing a project in thyroid disorders in district hospital here under National Ayush Mission. So I've had a lot of observations which I wanted to share with everybody while practicing in our clinic or in our institutes, wherever. Because there are certain things that we tend to overlook when it comes to the diagnosis part and the further management of the disease. So let me start on with the session. I'll just be brushing up with the normal thyroid gland broad classification of disorders, etc. So this is a normal thyroid gland over here. It's the actual butterfly in our body. We say we have butterfly in stomach, but the butterfly is actually on our neck, situated just before the trachea. The normal weight of a thyroid gland is usually 15 to 25 grams, and measurement in length it is 4 to 6 centimeter, and in thickness it's 1.3 to 1.8 centimeter. So coming to the classification, broadly we can classify it into hypofunction and hyperfunction of the gland, thyroid gland. So both hypofunction and hyperfunction are due to certain diseases. That is, we will be dealing with conditions that are occurring in the thyroid gland. So various diseases like Graves' disease, which is most common cause of hyperthyroidism. Then comes thyroiditis. That is the most common cause for hypothyroidism. And then goiter. Goiter can be of toxic goiter, non-toxic goiter, different types. Then thyroid cancer, which is not very common, but still we have to deal with thyroid cancers. And others, I have included certain diseases like thyroid storm, atresia, ectopic thyroid gland, etc. in others, because thyroid storm is an emergency case situation, a casualty case. They don't usually come to us we don't usually get a thyroid storm. Very rarely do we get a thyroid storm case in our day-to-day OPD. Then thyroid atresia, ectopic thyroid gland, thyroid glossosis, these are also very rare, but we get 1 or 2 cases. In my practice, I've never had a thyroid storm case after passing out from college. In college, I think 1 or 2 cases I've seen, that's it. To brush up on hypothyroidism, this is basically, these are the symptoms that patient presents with. When a patient comes to us, when a hypothyroid patient comes to us, the most common characteristic feature as in the most common symptom they will tell you is extreme prostration and excessive hair fall. These are the, maybe you will need to probe more into the case to get more symptoms, but patient will always come and tell us, I'm having extreme prostration and I'm having extreme excessive hair loss. Then on further inquiry, you will also be finding intolerance to cold and exertional dyspnea while climbing up or while doing heavy work. The patient will be experiencing dyspnea. Then they'll also be having complaining of weight gain tendency. Whatever I do, I'm not able to lose weight. That's what the patient typically says. They'll also be having decreased appetite, but still they'll be having weight gain tendency. In females, they usually complain of menorrhagia. These are the basic, all these symptoms here are, all these symptoms depicted here are belonging to hypothyroidism. But in a day-to-day practice, when you sit in your clinic, patient will come to tell you all these symptoms. Only these many symptoms they'll be giving you. Extreme prostration, excessive hair loss, weight gain tendency. In females, they'll be telling you about menorrhagia and exertional dyspnea also. Other symptoms like bradycardia or dryness of the skin, reduced sweating, all these symptoms, very rarely do they complain of voluntarily. And intolerance to cold, that is also complained by fewer patients. Coming to hyperthyroidism, we all know that heat intolerance is very marked. So when a patient of hyperthyroidism comes to us in a daily practice, we can easily make them out. They'll already be sweating. We can look at them and we can find they'll already be sweating, even if they are sitting under the fan. Then they'll be complaining of restlessness, anxiety. We can have visible tremors in their hands. And palpitations they'll be complaining of, along with dyspnea. Dyspnea may or may not be present, but dyspnea may or may not be present, but palpitations are short symptom. And then they'll also complain of hair fall, but in hyperthyroidism, the kind of hair fall is basically the hair becomes thin and brittle, so it breaks and falls. In hypothyroidism, general hair fall is there, but in hyperthyroidism, hair breaks and falls. Then other symptoms, other signs like systolic BP will be high. They will be coming to you with all these symptoms. They'll be very restless and anxious. Plus, they'll complain of palpitation, tremors, and we can see visible sweating, intolerance to heat. They'll be losing weight. In extreme cases of hyperthyroidism, loss of weight will be rapid also. Sometimes it can be rapid loss of weight also. So, and females will usually complain of oligomenorrhea or too scanty menses, or they'll also complain of amenorrhea. In both hypo and hyperthyroidism, patients usually complain of muscle myalgia and small joint pains, which might mimic rheumatoid arthritis at times. But this we know thyroid hormones are hormones that affect the entire body, like head to toe. Thyroid hormones have affection. So arthritic complaints are very common in thyroid, any kind of hyper or hypo. Both cases we get arthritic complaints associated with other cluster of symptoms. Coming on to goiter, basically broadly we can classify it into toxic or non-toxic. Toxic is basically hyperthyroid cases. When goiter is associated with hyperthyroidism, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention exophthalmos in hyperthyroidism, because why I'm mentioning it now is about 75% of patients will have, when they come to us, I told you they will be having, it will be visible on their face. So then they'll be having sweating around their face, plus the eyes will be bulging out. So that is how you make out hyperthyroidism patients. You can make out hyperthyroidism patients in a look. So talking about toxic goiter, goiterous nodule can be visible along with symptoms and signs of hyperthyroidism. That is basically toxic goiter. The non-toxic goiters are also there, which are, as ma'am said, may not even be taken, may not even be needing a treatment. Now, a goiter can be mainly of both toxic and non-toxic goiter. These can be of three types. Diffuse goiter means the swelling of thyroid gland. So there can be diffuse thyroid swelling, or there can be single nodular. Nodular swelling will be there. Diffuse swelling will be there. Nodular swelling can be single or multinodular. Multiple nodules may be there. So let me just tell you, I'll be just brushing up with this basic uh, classification of disorders or what. I will not be going deep into all these textbook things, because I want to emphasize on the clinical approach of thyroid disorders. Thyroiditis, again, it is of two types, resolving and non-resolving. It's a broad classification. Resolving is thyroiditis cases, those cases which can go back to normal stage, or resolve by itself or with treatment. But Hashimoto's thyroiditis is a non-resolving thyroiditis. It's also known as autoimmune lymphocytic thyroiditis. Females are more commonly affected, and the family history of any autoimmune disease will be there, usually. Not always, but usually. Serum antibodies will be very high in case of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. In case of thyroiditis, antibodies will be high usually. Mostly Hashimoto's thyroiditis, when the patient comes to us, they'll already be in a stage of hypothyroidism, and they'll probably stay in that stage if no treatment is given. But why I said that, because the other resolving thyroiditis types, that is decurrent thyroiditis, and then one more postpartum thyroiditis. So these kind of thyroiditis belong to resolving thyroiditis group. In that, usually we get a hyper to hypo, then to euthyroid phase. But in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, although the hyper phase may be there, but the patient comes to us, it's not very, almost always the patient comes to us with the hypothyroidism phase. Now coming to decurrent thyroiditis, it's also known as subacute thyroiditis. As I said, it's a resolving kind of thyroiditis, and it is usually associated with the preceding viral infection. We have a history of recent viral infection belonging to this patient. And we can see the pattern hyper functioning, symptoms of hyperthyroidism going towards hypothyroidism. Then it may either go to a euthyroid stage, or I mean that is normal thyroid functioning, or then it may stay in hypothyroid stage. Usually in kind of resolving thyroiditis, the swelling, the goiter will be little painful because it's kind of acute. It usually comes and sudden onset, kind of comparatively sudden onset. So there is pain, and dysphagia will also be usually present. Postpartum thyroiditis is the patient, the female gets, it's detected after pregnancy, after delivery, during the first year. In first 12 months after delivery, it will be detected. The basic mechanism is during pregnancy, the immune system is suppressed to tolerate the fetus. And after delivery, the immune system rebounds. And when the immune system rebounds, that effect in susceptible females, it causes increased activation of the antibodies. So that will lead to susceptible females will develop thyroiditis. That is commonly known as postpartum thyroiditis. Again, we can see that hyper to hypo. In our practice, we will see when initially the patient will come to us as a hyperthyroidism patient with signs and symptoms of hyperthyroidism. But as the course, if you're not on the right path with our medicine and treatment, we can see it changes to hypo. The pattern goes from hyper to hypo. And sometimes the patient, if the treatment goes well, the patient will get better. Otherwise, the patient will remain in permanent hypothyroidism phase. Thyroid cancer, like it's not, thyroid cancer is not as common as other cancers. But today, if we see the entire population of cancer patients have raised so much, because if you look around, you'll have 10 patients in your locality. So relatively, the number of thyroid cancer have also increased. And no much etiology is known about the origin of cancer. We all know about any malignancy. We cannot have a particular pinpoint etiology. So the risk factors include the same as all the other malignancy: exposure to high radiations, and it could also be hereditary, and females are more commonly affected than males. Clinical presentation also is not very typical. The only thing that we can find out is that there will be thyroid swelling will be there, along with dysphagia and hoarseness of voice. But this cannot be considered as a typical presentation for thyroid cancer, because as I said, in thyroiditis also we will get dysphagia. Usually patients, and there's a soft sensation in the throat, or while empty swallowing or while swallowing food, I get pain in throat. So dysphagia is variably present in thyroiditis cases also, in toxic goiter cases also. And hoarseness of voice can also be found if the goiter, the size of the goiter is too big. It might obstruct the trachea. So, and larynx also. So in that cases, the hoarseness of voice may be present. So what I'm saying is, this is not a very typical presentation of thyroid cancer. If students are watching, I don't want you to be misguided. This is not the typical presentation for thyroid cancer. These, along with the symptoms of malignancy, when combined with the symptoms of malignancy, you can suspect thyroid cancer. Now coming to the diagnosis part, I would want to emphasize more on these parts. First of all, how to examine the thyroid gland.
Thyroid examination. Examination of the thyroid gland starts with inspection. In doing so, it's important to consider the gland's anatomy and its surrounding structures. The thyroid cartilage is a helpful landmark, since the thyroid can be palpated bilaterally below it. In healthy individuals, the thyroid only weighs around 18 to 25 grams and should not be visible. An enlarged thyroid, otherwise known as goiter, is considered class 2 if macroscopically visible. When the head is reclined, thyroid enlargement can be seen even earlier. Palpation is usually performed from behind, although anterior palpation is also feasible. The gland is often only detectable upon palpation if a pathology is present, such as nodules, enlargement, or an altered consistency. You should also note any tenderness to touch, as seen in inflammatory changes, such as viral infection. To assess the mobility of the thyroid gland, ask the patient to swallow and offer a glass of water if necessary. If thyroid perfusion is increased, like in Graves' disease, examination may reveal an auscultable bruit and a palpable thrill.
So that is about the palpation and auscultation of thyroid gland. It's better to show the video, I thought, than explaining it. So the only thing that you have to notice is like you have to stand behind the patient in order to examine the thyroid gland. That is, it's shown in the video how to examine. Now I'll be going to the laboratory examination techniques. Before that, we'll just see that this is the basic, most simple picture to depict the regulatory mechanism of thyroid hormones. So basically, thyroid hormones are regulated. Hypothalamus is releasing thyrotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates anterior pituitary gland. Sorry, I got some disturbance in between. Okay. Am I audible? If something.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. You're audible, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. Okay. So hypothalamus is releasing thyrotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone TSH. And TSH in turn stimulates thyroid gland to produce thyroid hormones T4, T3, and T4. When T3 and T4 thyroid hormones are excess in the bloodstream, it gives negative feedback, and the production of TSH is stopped or reduced. And the excess of TSH also gives a negative feedback to the hypothalamus, reducing the production of thyrotropin releasing hormone. So this is the basic mechanism. Now we will know how to interpret the reports, diagnostic reports. So basic tests that we do is TFT, thyroid function test, T3, T4, TSH. Here, what I've seen, very rarely do they go for free T3, free T4 tests. Usually T3, T4, TSH is being done. And antibodies, autoantibodies are to be tested. USG, thyroid central imaging, and epinephrine. These are the basic tests that are done to diagnose thyroid disorders. Coming to TFT, these are the normal values. Everybody should be knowing it. T3 60 to 181 nanogram per deciliter, and T4 4.5 to 12.5 microgram per dl. TSH 0.35 to 5 MIU per international units per liter. In hyperthyroidism, as we all know, thyroid hormones will be, that is T3 and T4 will be high, and TSH will be less. In hypothyroidism, we have three conditions. When T3, thyroid hormones T3 and T4 will be less, but TSH will be high. That indicates primary hypothyroidism. That means the trouble is within the gland, because TSH is there, stimulation is there, but the gland is unable to produce any hormones. So T3 and T4 will be less in the bloodstream, but TSH levels will be high. In secondary, T3, T4 and TSH, all three hormones will be less, but TRH, that is thyrotropin releasing hormone, will be high. This means the trouble is within pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is being stimulated because TRH is there in high levels, but TSH is not being produced. So that is secondary hypothyroidism, where T3, T4 and TSH will be low, but TRH will be high. Tertiary, T3 and T4, TSH and TRH, all hormones will be low. That means the trouble is within hypothalamus. So hyperthyroidism, the diagnosing from TFT is very easy. T3, T4 will be very high, and TSH will be very low, as low as less than 0.005, etc. Hypothyroidism, these are the three phases. T3, T4 may be low with high TSH. T3, T4, TSH, all three will be low with high TRH. Then all four hormones will be low in hypothalamic lesions. Antibodies, these are the main antibodies that we should check for in thyroid disorders. TPO, that is thyroid peroxidase antibody, ATG, anti-thyroglobulin antibody. The normal values that I've given here is the most common laboratory values, okay. From lab to lab, sometimes it is found to be, the normal values is found to be changing according to their units, the units that they are measuring in. So this is the most common DDRC, DDRC and other common labs here have these values as normal values. So when to check for antibodies? This is something I want everybody to be careful about, because in usually I have seen people overlooking the TFT results. Like when we see high TSH, that is being reduced to 20. Suppose like we are having a TSH of 100 or 112, and then within 2 months it has come down to 23. So we will be saying, okay, TSH has come down, the disease is coming down, progressing or getting better. No, but it is not so. And I've even seen, we all must have seen people posting in social media saying like, they'll be having a good write-up about the marvelous effects of homeopathy, and they'll be giving 2 reports. In first report, TSH will be as high as 150 or 120, like that. And in the next report, which is probably taken in 2 months, the TSH level has come down to 32 or 24, like that. And that is supposedly taken as a good sign. But I would say no, it is not really so. Because in almost all the cases of thyroiditis, this is what is happening. Even though we might have T3, T4 levels within the normal limits, TSH values keep varying in high numbers. As I said, from 120, it can go down to 32, or from 20, it can go as high as 100 or above 100 or above 150 also. We get readings of TSH level above 150 also. So that is a common phenomena that we can see in case of thyroiditis. So if you get one report saying the TSH has come down to 20, it doesn't always mean that the disease is improving. It's not so. We should always, whenever TSH is high, unusually high, not almost, always, 100% of time, antibodies must be checked. Because in usual simple hypothyroidism, simple functional alteration of the thyroid gland, the TSH levels will usually vary in low numbers. Like it might be 12, or it might be 8, 9, 10, not more than that. And they'll come down also. From 8, it might come down to 6, and then from 6 to 5, from 5 to 4.2, like that it will come down. While going up also, the variation will be very low, 8 to 10 to 11, that. But in case of thyroiditis, almost always TSH varies in huge numbers. So whenever TSH is unusually high, we should always go for antibodies test. And one more thing is to be noted is whether or not the patient is taking hormone treatment, that is Thyronome. Thyronome usually for hypothyroidism, Thyronome is being given. So when a patient is taking Thyronome, if TSH has come down, if TSH is within the normal limits, it is because of the effect of thyroxine. So we should always see the effect of we should always see the test without thyroxine intake. That is when we can assess the real progress of the disease or prognosis of the disease. Coming to USG, why I'm emphasizing on this part is because whenever, at least I used to do in my initial years, just after passing out of college, I used to, whenever a report is given to me, I look for the impression part, what is written there. Okay, single goiter or multinodular goiter. Okay, this is the case of MNG, give some medicine. But what happens is this is what, even now I have seen people doing this. This is something that we should not be doing, because we should be knowing what is written in the entire report should be read. Why I'm saying it? Because in the entire report, the character of the nodule will be very well defined. So the character of the nodule can tell you if it is a benign tumor or a malignant tumor, or if it's a suspicious tumor. Because why we should know that is because many times some of the laboratories, some of the diagnostic people, they will give a query like it's a suspicious nodule, but many times they don't give it's a malignant or benign classification. They'll just give a report, multinodular goiter, these are the features of the goiter nodule. So we should know what features of the nodule indicate benign nature and what features indicate malignant feature. So this is the character of the nodule. When the nodule is iso or hyperechoic, that is the echogenicity of the nodule is same or more than that of the surrounding parenchyma, that is usually benign in nature. But when it becomes hypoechoic, it is usually suspicious and it usually turns out to be a malignant tumor. These are whatever I have written here in these columns, these are the terminologies that we can see in each report. If there is a surrounding halo, then that again is benign. Now they'll be writing the nodule, some of the nodules, so cystic changes. The cystic changes shown in the report is also a benign nature. The nodule may be cystic or spongiform, but they are benign in nature. When the nodule is solid, then it has a capability of becoming a malignant tumor. Then there will be peripheral calcification. Peripheral calcification or peripheral rim of calcification is shown in some of the reports, and peripheral vascularization. Both are characters of benign tumor. But when the calcification and vascularization become intranodular calcification and intranodular vascularity, that is malignant tumor. And cores of macrocalcifications are usually indicating a benign tumor. But when this occurs in a solitary nodule, this has an indication towards this might turn into a malignant tumor later on. So microcalcification again shows malignant nature of the disease. And in between, like we have an indeterminate nodule. Sometimes some of the reports read indeterminate nodule, which is like having both the characters. Sometimes it may be a hypoechoic nodule with cystic changes, and so it has both characters. So this is of indeterminate character, and I would say apart from whatever is benign, whatever characters are shown, all the other nodules should be sent for further investigation. And in malignant, one more feature is usually they will write taller than wider. That is, anteroposterior diameter is more than the transverse diameter. When the nodule is taller than wider, it has more tendency to be malignant. I'll just show a report, so it will be easy. So here, I hope everybody can read. I'll just read out. The nodule is 8 into 6 millimeter, wider than taller. But we read in malignant tumors, we have taller than wider nature of the tumor, of the nodule. But here in this particular patient, the nodule is wider than taller. But the next characters we can see, it is hypoechoic. Hypoechoic lesion is in. Hypoechoic echogenicity means it goes towards malignancy. Then the next sentence it is written, punctate calcification are seen within the lesion, which means there is intranodular calcification. Then lesion shows mild internal vascularity. That is, within the nodes, intranodular vascularity is also seen. So we have here the features of the nodule like hypoechoic, intranodular calcification, and intranodular vascularity. So these are basic, and the nodule is solitary also. So these are characters of malignant, characters indicating malignancy. So, and here in this report, this particular lab, they will give a detailed report every time. So they have written solitary nodule, TIRAD 5, I'll just explain now. Suggested annual follow-up. But what happens is, here the patient is having hypoechoic lesion with both the characters of malignancy. So I have sent for this, I sent this patient for FNAC, and unfortunately this has turned out to be a malignant case, papillary carcinoma case. So we should always know what is written in the report, entire report, not just the impression part. If we know the nature of the nodule, whether it is benign or malignant, if we can differentiate in the report, then we can send the patient for FNAC or further tests. Then only we can send the patient for further tests. Otherwise, we'll keep the patient as a multinodular or single nodular goiter and we'll keep treating without knowing what's happening inside the patient. And usually what happens in thyroid carcinoma, usually they will not be having much of the symptomatology either. So it will be very difficult to diagnose until and unless we know. Coming to the TIRADS, it's a TIRADS scoring method, thyroid imaging, recording and data systems. According to this classification, they have 5 classifications, TR1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where TR1 and 2 are not suspicious. TR1 is benign and 2 again is not suspicious. 3 is mildly suspicious, 4 is moderately suspicious, 5 is highly suspicious. In this report, we can see TIRADS 5 highly suspicious is given. So how do we reach the scores? In the boxes, it's given how to score. So composition of the nodule or the character of the nodule. When it is cystic or spongiform, so then the 0 point is given. When it is mixed cystic and solid, it's 1 point, and solid nodules mean 2 points. Then echogenicity again, anechoic doesn't have any point, but hyperechoic, isoechoic, they gain 1 point. Hypoechoic is 2 points. Very hypoechoic means 3 points. Wider than taller, 0 point. Taller than wider, 3 points. Smooth margins. We all know the margins of all kind of malignancies will be ill-defined or irregular. So here we can see lobulated or irregular margins have 2 points, and extrathyroidal extension, like retrosternal extension, usually we can see in some cases. That again has 3 points. Echogenic forces, that is mostly about the calcification they are talking. So 1 point, macro calcification is having 1 point, peripheral calcification is having 2 points, whereas intranodular, punctate echogenic forces, that is intranodular calcification, which is having 3 points. So this is how we score each nodule, and according to their points, TR score is given. 1 to 5 is given. TR5 is highly suspicious. TR4 and 3, TR4 is moderately suspicious. TR3 is mildly suspicious. Now here it is given like in TR3 cases where TIRADS score is 3, it is mildly suspicious. In those cases, they recommend FNAC if the size of the nodule is more than 2.5 centimeter. In moderately suspicious, FNAC is recommended if the size of the nodule is more than 1.5 centimeter. In TR5, FNAC is recommended if the size of the nodule is more than 1 centimeter. But what I would suggest is, when the patient comes to us with a score of TR4 or 5, it is always better to go for FNAC irrespective of the size of the nodule, because what happens, these 2 category nodules, they usually have the tendency to turn towards malignancy in a later stage also. So sometimes it happens so that patient might be coming to us they would already be having a report in their hand which is taken 2 or 3 years ago. So during the onset of the disease or something like that, and they'll come to us after a long time. The patient has already crossed some 2 or 3 years, and 3 years back the tumor was TR4 category. Now it has passed enough time to have changed into a malignant nodule. So it is almost always better to go for FNAC irrespective of the size of the nodule. What happens is at times when the patient comes to us after 3 or 4 years after the onset of the nodule, we will be already having a report. Sometimes we tend not to repeat the test because USGs again becomes costly for certain patients, will not be able to afford. So we'll give some time, and that time it keeps going like 3 months, 6 months. Again, time keeps going. So it's always better in TR4 and TR5 cases to go for FNAC and be confirmed. This is malignant nodule we already saw. Now, what all are the USG findings we could find in thyroiditis case? Here, diffuse enlargement of the thyroid gland, thyromegaly will be shown in the USG. May or may not be associated with nodules, presence of nodules. Vascularity of the entire gland is increased, and there might be reactive lymph nodes. Reactive lymph nodes, cervical lymph nodes may be reactive. Most of the thyroiditis cases we get reactive lymph nodes. So here in the report we can read both lobes and isthmus of the thyroid are diffusely enlarged and show coarse parenchymal ecotexture. Mildly increased vascularity noted in both lobes of the thyroid. Basically, diffuse enlargement of thyroid gland with or without presence of nodule and increased vascularity plus coarse echogenic nature of the parenchyma. Thyroiditis cases, they usually correlate with that antithyroid autoantibodies. As we already discussed that. Thyroid CT imaging is a more advanced imaging technique where radionuclide scanning is given. So any radionuclide scanning, we get the character of the parenchyma, and it usually confirms hyperthyroidism, even thyroiditis cases also, and more specific, supposed to be more specific for malignancies. FNAC, I've not mentioned, everybody knows, fine needle aspiration cytology. And one thing about FNAC I want to say here is, we all must be knowing, but let me just tell you all again, FNAC is not always confirmatory, because there are instances we have had patients in our OP here. We have clinical features of malignancy. The nodule, we can clinically, everything is pointing towards malignancy, and then we send for FNAC expecting a result of carcinoma. But the FNAC was negative for carcinoma. And then because the clinical presentation was too positive for malignancy, we advised excision biopsy. And during excision biopsy, it turned out to be a malignant tumor. So what happened? So what I want to say is, apart from all the diagnostic techniques that we have, if the patient is coming to us and we have a strong suspicion of malignancy, then it is always better to refer the patient. At least I would refer the patient. I don't know, you all might have different ideas, contrasting ideas. At least I do not have the knowledge or experience to treat a cancer patient. So I almost always refer the patient. I don't wait for treatment, wait for the patient to receive treatment from homeopathy. You all might have different ideas. You all might have experience also. But I'm really sorry to say I have zero knowledge in treating a cancer case. So I refer the case. Management part. Management, mainly initial management, dietary advices we have to give. Basically, we should avoid goitrogens. Goitrogens are cabbage, the common food items that are cabbage, cauliflower, tapioca, soya, etc. are to be avoided. In this, tapioca is, because I am from I am from a district where it is a hilly area. We see a lot of people in this district, a lot of people are using tapioca as a staple food, almost as a staple food. So incidence of tapioca is very common, is more in this district in Kerala. It is found so, and the thyroid project is mainly focusing on this district because of that. So tapioca is, I don't know, the goitrogenous character of or the components of tapioca, maybe it's harmful. So whenever, almost always we have a history of tapioca intake. So these are the goitrogenous food items that are to be avoided. Then use of iodized salt is to be recommended. Then avoid coffee, tea, and other food items which may hinder the action of medicine. That is our homeopathic part. Like we should be, we all know there are certain food items that are to be avoided so that the action of homeopathic medicine goes on smoothly. Here, I just want to point out one thing. I've written avoid coffee, tea. I've mentioned tea here because I have seen a lot of people say you can drink coffee, you can drink tea, but not coffee. I mean, even I did not have this idea, but my senior, my mentor in CRH Kottayam, Dr. Gominathan, he taught me this, like tea must be avoided. It is written in chronic diseases, paragraph 110. 110, it is mentioned that tea is to be avoided for all the category of people. Just before that, in that paragraph 110 109, he is mentioning coffee when the patient has reached the age of 30 or he has crossed the 20s. It is difficult to withdraw coffee at once, so you can have gradual withdrawal of coffee in such patients. It is permissible to do so according to Master Hahnemann. But regarding tea, Hahnemann is clearly mentioning in whatever lighter form, in whatever age group, in either male or female, it is never advisable. That is what he has told about tea. So it is not so that you can drink tea and not coffee while taking homeopathic medicine. It is so that you should avoid both coffee and tea. Now coming to the medicinal part. Okay, medicinal part of the management. I guess students are also watching. Whoever is watching, all I want to say is constitutional treatment is the bottom line of homeopathic treatment. There is no doubt in that. There are certain times when you get one-sided diseases, or for example, patient comes to us with a nodule, swelling of the thyroid gland, and no other symptoms, absolutely no other symptoms. So you cannot do anything, just go for a specific medicine. And for me, what happens, I cannot find out, usually I will not be able to find out a constitution in one go, one sitting or two sitting. So I have to make the patient come back. So in order to make the patient come back, I have to show them some results. Not just me, we all have to show them some results. And when the patient comes back to you to tell you that these symptoms are okay, these symptoms are not okay, and the next time the patient should come and tell more symptoms are getting better, and you want the patient to keep coming back, to tell you that they are getting better. So for that, initially, or sometimes sometimes you might need to use some specific remedies. So what I've mentioned here these are the remedies that are found useful when given in these conditions. That's it. These are not specific for any condition. Like I have mentioned the argentum nitricum in hypothyroidism. It doesn't mean argentum nitricum will cure hypothyroidism. I got result in hypothyroidism with argentum nitricum when there were certain indications. It's not a blind application of medicine. So bottom line is always constitutional treatment. As we can see, most of the medicines mentioned listed here are constitutional medicines only. So these medicines, when applied in these conditions, have given good results. That is the only implication I am giving here. Okay. For hypothyroidism, Calcarea card has almost never failed me. Whenever I have given Calcarea card, it has given good results. Very few cases it has not responded. Graphitis is given only constitutionally. It has not given it has not had any specificity for hypothyroidism. Maybe some symptoms like weight gain, chilliness, all those symptoms sometimes lead to certain remedies. That's it. Argentum nitricum, I have not had much, much constitutional features of argentum nitricum. But from my seniors' experience, this was handed over to me. And when given argentum nitricum, I found TSH levels coming down. Sepia, sulfur, pulsatilla, and thyroidinum. Thyroidinum usually helps in bringing, especially thyroidinum 3x and 30 potencies. Have been found and improving improving the thyroid hormone levels. Again, that was not given because that was indicated. There will be some kind of indications to give thyroidinum. For thyroidinum 3x, it's sometimes given as an adjacent remedy also, conjugate remedy also. In hyperthyroidism, lactases, natramur, phosphorus, iodum, ferromet, ferromiode, belladonna, cactus, spongia, all these medicines have given good results when given in case of hyperthyroidism. We can just think of these remedies when a patient is coming to us with hyperthyroidism. In thyroiditis, calcarea iode has given very good result in thyroiditis cases. Again, natramur, ignatia, phosphorus, iodum. Iodum also again when given in lower potencies like 3x or 30 have given more good results. Iode very good, giving very good results for thyroiditis cases. Then sepia, lactases, pulsatilla, they were all given based on constitution and have given good results. So ignatia, natramur, all these remedies, usually we will get some kind of indication towards these remedies in cases of thyroiditis, some kind of mental irritability. There will be features of deep sighing. In most of the patients of thyroiditis cases, deep sighing is also a common feature. So these remedies somehow get indicated in these conditions. So gives good results also. And in goiter, calcarea card, calcarea iode, calcarea floor, all these are not just my own experience. This is the experience of all the entire team of thyroid project here in my district hospital. So these are not just my observation, but I have included remedies which I myself have got results. Then natramur, spongia, bromium. Bromium has given very good results in cases of MNGs. Phytolacca, strophanthus. Strophanthus I have included because in boric it is given an indication in a goiter, but we've only started applying. To be frank, we've only started giving strophanthus nowadays. We are yet to review the results of strophanthus. So it is also a remedy to be thought of. Then iodum, ferromiode, lactases, puja, badiaga. Badiaga because it is having goiter as an indication, plus mucus raising sensation in the throat. Although there are certain symptoms of thyroid disorder that is contributing towards badiaga. One more thing, in case of lactases, in chemotherapy it is given left-sided goiter. Lactases is the only remedy given in left-sided goiter. But whenever I've given in one-sided case, when the patient comes to us with a tumor, goiter, and no other symptoms, and if it is left-sided, I always give lactases. But I don't know, I don't have much results like that. But lactases overall, as a if you see in overall MNG cases or goiter cases, lactases has given results, but for left side tumors, I have not had any results. So as I said, constitutional treatment is always the bottom line, but these are a few medicines found useful when given in these conditions. Okay. Now coming to the acute management, usually hyperthyroidism patients will come to us with acute complaints of palpitation, restlessness, anxiety, sometimes slightly varying BP, also high BP, and increased sweating. So in such cases, ferromet and iodum have given very good results, along with which may be followed by natramur or ignatia, then belladonna and cactus. These are the remedies I have found useful in acute management of hyperthyroidism, because the symptomatology is such: the hot flushes with sweating and palpitation and tremor. These are the cardinal signs that we get in acute cases of hyperthyroidism. These are very well covered by these remedies. Ferromet almost always gives good results in acute management. Iodum gives good results, and these remedies, when followed up with natramur, almost in 2 or 3 days, the complaint gets really better. Even now, we have a patient who got admitted day before yesterday. She had severe prostration plus increased sweating, and then she had palpitations and tremors. Her BP was high. That is how we admitted the patient. And today, day before yesterday, we admitted. Today, she is completely better. From the first day itself, her BP was normalized, and yesterday her prostration was gone. Palpitations were gone. Today, her tremors are also gone. So in 3 days, Ferromet is the remedy that I have given first day. Second day, I had followed it up with Natramur. So now the patient is completely better. Tomorrow she can go home. In hypothyroidism, in acute cases, usually it's not an emergency situation. The patient almost always come to you telling, I'm having severe weakness, severe prostration, and unable to do anything at all. That is the main thing patient complains of. In such cases, thyroidinum has given good result. Argentum nitricum, calcarea card, and iodum. These are the remedies that I could get results in acute cases of hypothyroidism. Now, this is one important aspect, how to withdraw hormonal tablets. Almost all the cases coming to us will be taking hormone tablets as an allopathic treatment, that is thyroxine. Allopathic treatment is basically hormone treatment. So they'll always be taking Thyronome, or in case of hyperthyroidism, they'll be under Neomercazole. Neomercazole, the other names are Methimazole or Carbimazepine. In hyperthyroidism, they'll also be given PTU, that is propylthiouracil, usually given in 400, 500, that is the unit. Neomercazole is given 5 mg or 10 mg. Thyronome for hypothyroidism. Thyronome is starting from 25 mcg or 50 microgram, then it goes up as the patient in allopathic treatment. This is the tendency that it starts with 25 mcg, then goes up. When the patient is coming to us, he or she might be taking Thyronome 100 or 150 micrograms. And one more thing about hormone treatment, when the patient is taking Thyronome more than 50 or 75 or 100 or 150 mcg, that again almost always indicates thyroiditis, because simple hypothyroidism is usually managed with Thyronome 25 mcg. They usually get better very easily. But in thyroiditis cases, they have to go for Thyronome above 75 mcg. So that is again one more indication for us to think of thyroiditis. When we reduce Thyronome, immediately on the first visit, I would not advise the patient to reduce Thyronome unless, of course, the TSH levels are too low, as low as less than 0.01 or less than the normal limit, less than 0.35. Only in such cases, I reduce Thyronome levels on the first visit. Otherwise, we should not be reducing it. We should give time for homeopathic medicine to act. Then only we should reduce the Thyronome medicine. So, and while reducing, we should only reduce 12.5 microgram. If a patient is taking a 75 microgram tablet, we should be advising him to take 62.5. I'm not very good with numbers, but 75 minus 12.5, that is 62.5 mcg. So likewise, when a patient is taking, if suppose a patient is taking 62.5 mcg when they come to us, usually that doesn't happen. Okay, they go from 50, they straightly go for 75. Allopaths, they will usually give 75, 25, they'll increase. So but while reducing it, you should always be cautious. After reducing 12.5, that is from 75, you have reduced it to 62.5. Now you should wait for at least 2 months to reduce once more. And after 2 months, we should definitely get a TSH result. And if the TSH result is favorable for us for the treatment, then only we should reduce it further, because it is having a rebounding phenomena. We all know the withdrawal effect of drugs, right? So when the withdrawal happens too soon, the thyroid hormone levels go down very low. TSH levels go very high. That is, one thing is, it reduces the confidence of the patient, it reduces the confidence of the doctor. Another thing is, this is harmful for the body as well. The high variation, sudden high variation in the hormone levels harm the body cells as well. So we should always be very, very careful while reducing the hormone tablets. That is for Thyronome, reduce only 12.5 micrograms in one visit. Wait for at least 2 to 3 months. Find the favorable TSH result. Then only go for further reduction. Then coming to neomercazole, that is the medicine given in cases of hyperthyroidism. In neomercazole, when more than Thyronome, neomercazole is more, withdrawal of neomercazole is more dangerous because if a patient is taking neomercazole 10 mg BD and we ask them to, some of them ask them to stop the medication as such. The thyroid hormone levels go very high. It shoots up. T4 levels go as high as 22, 25 in a span of 1 month or 2 weeks also. And T3 levels can go as high as 500. We have seen such cases. So, and that causes, that might lead, sometimes this might lead to a thyroid storm phase. So we should avoid that. We should never ask. While cutting off Thyronome, it doesn't always go to an extreme casualty stage. But neomercazole, when we cut, we should be really, it's a toxic, thyrotoxicosis is being developed if we do that. So whenever neomercazole is, patient is coming to us 10 mg BD, so we should always reduce it as 10 mg and the second dose of 10 mg should be reduced to 5 mg. So from 20, we'll be reducing to 15. Then from both 5 mg BD we can do, then 5 mg OD, then 5 mg alternate, and then maybe even half of that. So these again, we should wait. In one visit, we reduced it to 15. Next visit, immediately we should not go for 10. Again, we should wait for another 2 to 3 months, get a favorable TSH value. Then only TSH, T3, T4, all three values. Then only go for further reduction. The same applies for PTU also. PTU is usually given in 400 grams, 500 grams, that is the usual units given. So again, in the same way, you have to cut down to half, reduce it to, like if it is BD, then instead of 101, you can reduce it to 10 half. That is how we should reduce. This is the withdrawal pattern we should be following. Always, once you have reduced the allopathic treatment, always wait for at least 2 to 3 months and get a favorable result, then only go for further reduction. If we are not getting a favorable result, we should not reduce it further. Now comes to the fancy part of the presentation. Because we have had so much talk, now I should show some results also. These results I have taken from our hospital cases. So these are not entirely my cases. The entire thyroid team has worked towards to get this result. Okay, so this is a case of hypothyroidism where we have the patient was having TSH value of 13.15 in the initial visit. And after treatment, like all these reports that I'm showing, these patients are still under treatment, okay? So while treatment, after taking medication, homeopathic treatment, this patient has a TSH value of 5.22. This is one hypothyroidism case. This is just one case, okay? There are many cases which have improved quite well, and we have even stopped Thyronome also. Thyronome, not just withdrawal, but there are cases where we could stop Thyronome also. This is a case of hyperthyroidism. TSH value was this. Here we can see T3, T4 values were not much altered, but TSH has gone down to less than 0.005. Okay. Why T3, T4 are not altered? So when TSH value has come down so much, the gradual process is happening. Next visit, if medicinal intervention is not given, T3 and T4 might go very high. So this patient has come right at the right time, I should say. Okay, so from TSH less than 0.005, it has come up to less than 0.001. Although it is not, the patient is still under treatment, although this is not a very, the patient has not come to normal levels of TSH, but still it's a very good result for us. Why I'm saying that? usually patients get stuck in this phase, less than 0.05 or less than 0.01. Those are the phases where the disease gets stuck. From there to bring further improvement, it's actually very difficult. I don't know what is the reason. Maybe it's a flaw in our treatment or whatever it is. We have found that patients usually getting stuck at this point. So from 0.005 to coming up to less than 0.01 is a very good result. Now another case where the patient had come to us at the phase TSH value of less than 0.0001, less than 0.01, and they have come up to, with treatment, homeopathic treatment, they have come up to 0.23, almost near the lower border of normal limit. This is again case of hyperthyroidism. Okay. Now thyroiditis. Thyroiditis, I already mentioned we should always be analyzing thyroiditis prognosis with the TPO and the ATG values. So here is one case I wanted to show. Initially, the TPO value was 498.3, 498.3, okay, international units. After treatment, the TPO value has come down to 250.8. That is almost half. And ATG, anti-thyroglobulin antibody, initial value was 527.3. After treatment, it has come down to 369.6. This is a good determination of thyroiditis, a good prognosis of thyroiditis. Whereas if we had seen only TSH, then that would not have helped. But thyroid antibodies have come down. Antibody levels have come down means it's a good case. And this is a case of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, okay. Okay, now coming to the, till now we saw the functional alteration being normalized. Now we see the structural changes that have also come back to better stages. Okay, so in this patient, when the patient came to us, she had, I'm only specifying the nodule sizes. Okay, she had a nodule of the size. The largest nodule measures 2.3 into 1.3 centimeter. That was in the right lobe. In the after treatment report, in the right lobe, the largest nodule is only 1 centimeter. It was 2.3 into 1.3 centimeter. It's only 1 centimeter. And even the largest nodule in left lobe also 1.7 centimeter. Even that is lesser than the previous nodule, largest nodule. The second report we have. I'll be reading out only the nodule size because size of the, okay, I'll tell you after this. I'll explain. Largest nodule is 2.1 into 1 centimeter. It has come down to 1.6 into 1.1. These patients are still under treatment. Okay. In this case, I want to show you in left lobe of the thyroid, there is slight increase in the size of the lobe, but it is still within the normal values. But we can see both lobes of the thyroid are enlarged. That is written in the report. That means there could be a thyroiditis progressing in the background. So again, that needs further investigation. So these are the things that we should be seeing in the report. Okay. Comparing the nodule size, we have got result in this. 2.1 into 1 centimeter has come down to 1.6 to 1.1 centimeter. Now this is the case, the more interest. I don't know if it is very visible to everybody. I'll read out anyway. Thyroid, both lobes and isthmus. The first, when the patient came to us, she came to us with this result that echoic nodules, largest in right lobe measuring 4 millimeter and largest in the left lobe measuring 5 millimeter. There were subcentimetric nodules in this patient. After treatment, there is no evidence of any nodule in the thyroid gland. So this is completely, the nodules have completely disappeared. Okay, that's about the session, the entire part of the session. So what I just want to sum up, the session, we discussed about gross thyroid clinical presentation. Basically, what we have to see a cluster of symptoms. Patient will always come and tell you. Most common symptoms that they come and tell you is either weight gain or weight loss, great prostration, hair fall. Great prostration and hair fall, almost always patients come and tell us voluntarily. Then heat intolerance in the case of hyperthyroidism, along with palpitation. In hypothyroidism, instead of all that, patient will be complaining of exertional dyspnea and weight gain. In hyperthyroidism, about 50% of patients will complain of weight loss, and more than 70% of the patients will have exophthalmos visible. Hot flushes, patients in hyperthyroidism, usually patients will come and tell us increased heat of the body. Hot flushes, basically hot flushes with sweating, and tremors are also visible. Okay. Now we also discussed about the interpretation of thyroid function test, about the USG, we know, diet. One more thing I forgot to mention is exercises, like to improve functional abnormalities or the regularize the hormonal values. We should always go for we should always advise exercises that are improving the basal BMR. Okay, so for such exercises should be advised. And for goiter, there are recommended neck exercises, like yoga exercises are there. We can find out, and those can be recommended. We also discussed about the gradual importance of why we should withdraw the allopathic treatment gradually. We should be cautious in that. We also discussed a bit of homeopathic treatment. So that is about all about what I had to say regarding thyroid cases. Now, I also let us now conclude the session. I think the time is also over. Basically, these are all what I wanted to mention. The points that we tend to overlook while reading a report, while managing a patient, while seeing a patient. Immediately we should be able to assess what is the condition, and we should be able to think like this can go into a worse condition, so we should be able to take precautionary measures at the beginning itself. So let me just thank whoever helped me. Like, first of all, for inviting me into this session, Dr. Rakhal called me, and then Dr. Dheeraj called me, and Sheena ma'am called me. She gave a very good, very fabulous introduction also. Thank you so much. Thank you all the organizing committee members for supporting me. And I also want to thank my colleagues here, Dr. Akhila and Dr. Chitra, and my superintendent, Dr. Ambili. Okay, they've all helped me during these during my tenure here. So thank you everybody. This is all about my session. Over to the moderators.
Yes, Dr. Anu, it was indeed a wonderful session. So we have few questions for you into the chat box. They have asked you about the potency of the medicine and the dose of repetitions which you usually preferable okay. Doses and potency of the medicines.
Okay. As I have already mentioned, the bottom line of treatment is constitutional. Okay, so potencies usually thyroidinum and iodum I've already mentioned. 3x and 30 potencies have given more results in cases of hyper and hypothyroidism. Okay, iodum 3x in case of hyperthyroidism and practice also. Thyroid 3x in case of hypothyroidism. These are to bring down the values, TSH values, or bring up the values. And these are only, what you say, just for the time being, till you arrive at the constitution, till you arrive at a confident constitutional medicine. I would not suggest repetition of these medicines, prolonged repetition of these medicines. No. So these are the potencies. Other medicines, constitutional medicines, usually we start with 200 potency, and if needed, sometimes it goes up to 1 m after a period of time. And what we do is we don't, if a patient, if we are very confident about the constitutional remedy that is given, we don't often change the potency or dosage or the medicine also. We wait. If you are sure about the constitution, wait, you will definitely get results. There are certain phases where you may get a little exacerbation of the symptoms. That I told you, acute exacerbation we can manage with certain remedies, and then continue with constitutional treatment. Potency, this is what I have usually found. Thyroid when used in PS, repeated doses have given good results for bringing down TSH, thyroidinum 30 also, and argentum nitricum 200 have given good results to bring down TSH levels, and iodum 3x has given good results to bring up TSH levels. Ferromet has given good results. Ferromet usually 30 potency has given good results. Ferrum iode 30 potency. But these are all, we know it's not fixed potency. Sheena ma'am, of course, she did PG in organon, so she should be, she should be supportive of this idea that potency or dosage or medicine cannot be fixed for a condition, right? So it keeps changing, or it depends on the patient, the susceptibility and the other factors that decide the potency. But these are common observations that, about potency and dosage.
Yeah, so you have followed the normal rules of susceptibility and other factors which are the criteria taken for the potency selection and repetition, right? According to the homeopathic principles.
Yes, ma'am.
So it varies according to the patient.
Yes,
but commonly around 200 potency is the one which you found good results. Among the medicines?
Among the medicines. That's what, ma'am.
200, the potency 200 was found to be having much effectiveness.
Effectiveness in case of argentum nitricum, natramur, calcarea card, calcarea iode, calcarea fluor. These remedies were all given in 200 potencies, and ignatia was usually found effective more in 1 m potency. Natramur again from 200 we have changed to 1 m, and sometimes ignatia had to be gone up because we started of course with 1 m and then gone higher up. We can only go up. 10 m we went to. Those are given good results. Then ferrum iode, as I said, the most results were found in 30th potency. Ferrum met, most results were found in 30 and 200 potency. And calcarea iode again 30 and 200. Both have given good results.
Okay, there is one more question on the scope on multiple nodules less than 1 centimeter, or in case of thyroiditis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis and colloid goiter. What is the scope according to your experience?
What is the
scope of homeopathy in colloid goiter, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, as well as if there is multiple nodules?
Okay, ma'am, I've already shown a few results here. So colloid goiter is usually a benign goiter. So
yes.
The scope is, I've shown around three reports of goiters being cured and size being reduced. So multinodular goiter, we have the size of the nodules reduced. We have the size of the lobes reduced. Patients are still under treatment, and I have shown a result where there were sub-centimetric nodules. That means the nodules were less than 1 centimeter in size. Those nodules have completely gone. The after treatment report showed no evidence of any nodules. So the scope of homeopathy in goiter cases is really good. We are seeing it. That's why I attached the reports in the presentation, because we can talk so much about the treatment and the goiter, everything, but we should show results, right? We should have results. Yes. And yes, we have results. And thyroiditis, we can beautifully bring down the disease. I've shown antibody levels coming down. I've shown the report, right? Antibody levels have come down, and TSH levels also come down gradually. So in thyroiditis cases, if we have a TSH level decreasing in a high number, it may not always be a good prognosis. But if it is reducing gradually and it keeps reducing, then that is a good sign, along with the reduction of antibodies.
Okay. Okay. So after the medicine is given, you assess it with symptoms or by reports. Both will be considered, I believe, right? Yeah.
Both.
So that is another
Because,
question asked. But it is a right thing. Both
yeah.
you have to consider the reports as well as the
Yeah,
symptoms.
because reports we cannot always ask them to go for the test very often. These tests for thyroid disorders are quite costly. Even TSH costs more than 500. So
Yes.
TFT I mean costs more than 500. So once in 2 or 3 months only we do TFT, and once in 4 to 5 months we do antibody test. Antibody tests again cost more than 1,000. Both the antibodies together, and USG costs around 1,000 again, 900 to 1,000. So it's not, and I am working in a government hospital, so it's not very easy to ask the patient to go for tests every time. So symptomatic assessment is there, where, as I said, the cardinal symptoms patients say is either weakness, hair fall, and weight gain, exertional dyspnea, or in hyperthyroidism, anxiety, restlessness, tremors, palpitation, etc. So we can see the symptoms coming down very beautifully. Palpitation, tremors we can elicit in the OPD. Tremors will be absent when the patient comes after 3 or 4 visits. Tremors will be absent. So symptomatic and reports analysis, both we do.
Okay. The allopathic medicine can be withdrawn completely after.
There are cases in which we have withdrawn allopathic medicine completely. Like it has come down to 25 micrograms, 12.5 micrograms. We alternate, we give, ask the patient to take 12.5 microgram thyroxine alternate days, and then again maybe once a week, and then we withdraw it. We have cases where we have withdrawn completely, even neomeprazole also.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anu. So that was some queries which was there in the chat box. So to conclude with, I would like to tell that early diagnosis and treatment remain the cornerstone for management of any disease. So our Dr. Anu Joseph has given a review on the common disorders of thyroid, focusing on the clinical observation and measures to diagnose these disorders. She also gave an insight into the homeopathic management and emphasizing on the reading and interpretation of investigations, which many a time homeopathic doctors ignore. Thank you very much, Dr. Anu, for sharing your experience on a very common endocrine disorder of the current age. It was indeed a fruitful session. So thank you very much. We'll have an association to continue with you in future too. Thank you, Dr. Anu.
Thank you.
I hand over to Dr. Raisa.
Thank you, ma'am. Knowledge is power, says Lord Bacon. So I'm sure that today's session has empowered you all with the knowledge to treat the thyroid disorders in your clinical practice. So on behalf of the Father Muller Homeopathic Medical College Provision 2020 team, I express my sincere thanks to Dr. Anu Joseph. Okay, I'm sure she has done a wonderful job about presenting the management on the thyroid disorders. Okay, she has explained in detail about the diagnostic methods as well as various successful cases also she has shown. So I thank you, ma'am, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Okay, thank you. I also thank Dr. Sheena Salim, Professor and Head of the Department of Pathology and Microbiology, Father Muller Homeopathic Medical College, for being the moderator of this session. Thank you, ma'am. I take this opportunity to thank our administrator, Reverend Father Roshan Krasta, as well as our principal, Dr. Shivaprasad K, and our vice principal, Dr. E.S.J. Prabhukiran. I also thank all the organizing committee members of Provision 2020 for their tireless efforts. Okay, they have made this event successful. So I thank all the eager and enthusiastic participants of Provision 2020. Okay, so the chat box, it is full of questions. So it shows your interest in learning further. So I thank each one of you, and it is your presence that makes this program a resounding success. Okay, thank you each one of you. So Provision 2020, it is not a single day event, it is a month-long event. So in the upcoming days also, we'll be coming up with much interesting topics. So we'll meet again so that we can all grow in knowledge, we can gain, share and gain further knowledge. So we'll meet again. So before we wind up, I'd like to introduce the tomorrow's presenter, okay, Dr. S.G. Biju, founder patron of School of Artistic Homeopathy for Youngsters and Adults. Okay, he will be presenting on the topic Homeopathy Beyond Science. So let us all eagerly await for the upcoming session. Okay, till then, I bid adieu for all of you and good night. Thank you.